she asked. "Take the cloth off." The rancher obeyed, then stood in horror. James wiped the sweat from his brow as he stepped out of the small cabin he called home. The sun had already begun its slow descent behind the distant hills, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. It had been another long day at the ranch, and his bones ached from hours of feeding cattle, mending fences, and checking the water troughs. The life he had chosen was not an easy one, but it was a life he loved. The ranch had been in his family for generations, and even though times were hard, there was a sense of pride in knowing that he was continuing a tradition built on hard work, honesty, and a deep connection with the land. As he walked along the dusty path leading to the barn, James noticed something unusual near the edge of the forest that bordered his property. A faint shape, covered in what looked like a thick gray cloth, sat half-hidden among the bushes. At first he thought it might be an animal, perhaps a lost dog or a stray cat. But as he got closer, he realized it might be something, or someone human. His heart skipped a beat, and a strange mix of curiosity and caution filled him. "Who could be out here at this hour?" he muttered to himself. James was used to visitors on his property, but usually it was neighbors or traveling salesmen. This felt different. He slowed his pace and approached the figure carefully, keeping his hands near his sides, ready for anything. The forest's edge was shadowy now, the sunlight fading quickly, and the cool evening air made him shiver. As he drew closer, a soft voice called out, "Please help me." It was faint, trembling, but there was an unmistakable urgency in it. James froze for a moment, scanning the area. The voice seemed to come from the bundle. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Who's there?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm and steady. A young woman emerged from behind the bushes. Her hair was messy, and her clothes were dusty as if she had been traveling for a long time. Her eyes, wide and anxious, met his, and James felt a pang of concern. She was holding the bundle tightly against her chest, as if protecting it from the world. I found this," she said, her voice shaking. "I don't know what to do. Can you help me?" James hesitated. He didn't know this woman, and yet there was something about her tone that made him trust her instincts. Maybe it was the desperation in her voice, or perhaps it was simply his nature. He had always been a man who helped those in need, even when it was inconvenient or risky. "Of course," he said finally. "Come to the cabin. We can see what's going on there." The woman nodded, relief washing over her face. Together they walked slowly along the path to his small cabin, the bundle still cradled tightly in her arms. James noticed the way she flinched at every crack of a branch or rustle of leaves, her eyes darting nervously into the darkening forest. It was clear she had been through something difficult, something that left her scared and unsure. Once inside the cabin, James set a chair near the table and gestured for her to sit. "You're safe here," he said gently. "Just tell me what happened." The woman sat down, her hands trembling as she placed the bundle on the table. James noticed that it was heavy, oddly shaped, and wrapped in a cloth that obscured whatever was inside. The way she clutched it suggested she was afraid someone, or something, might take it from her. "I found it near the creek," she began, her voice soft but quivering. "It was abandoned. I didn't know what to do, and then I thought maybe someone here could help." James nodded, listening carefully. He asked questions gently, careful not to upset her further. "How long ago did you find it?" he asked. "Just before sunset," she replied. "I didn't have time to think. I just knew I couldn't leave it there." James understood that feeling all too well. On a ranch, sometimes the smallest actions could make the biggest difference. Ignoring a problem rarely solved it, and helping when someone was in need was the only way to make things right. He felt a quiet determination settle over him. "All right," he said. "We'll figure this out together. Don't worry. You did the right thing by bringing it here." The woman's eyes softened, a hint of gratitude replacing the anxiety that had gripped her earlier. For a moment, the tension in the room eased. James could see that she was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. Her journey to the ranch had not been easy, and yet she had come seeking help, trusting a stranger with something important. He glanced at the bundle again, curiosity rising despite his cautious nature. "Do you want me to see what's inside?" he asked. The woman hesitated, looking at him with a mix of fear and hope. If you think you can help, yes," she whispered. James nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He had no idea what he would find under that cloth, but he knew that ignoring it was not an option. He reached out slowly, his hands trembling slightly, not from fear of the unknown, but from the anticipation of what this moment might reveal. As he touched the cloth, he could feel the weight of whatever was inside. It was solid, yet oddly fragile. The woman watched him closely, her breath shallow, waiting for his next move. James could feel the tension in the room, the quiet hum of the evening outside, and the unspoken understanding that something important was about to happen. "All right," he said softly. "Let's see what we have here." He began to lift the cloth carefully, piece by piece, making sure not to disturb its contents too quickly. The woman leaned forward slightly, her hands hovering over the table, as if offering silent support or protection. James' heart raced. He had faced many challenges on the ranch, but nothing like this. There was no manual, no past experience to guide him. This was completely unknown territory, and yet he felt a strange calmness settle over him. The room seemed to grow quieter with each passing second, the kind of quiet that makes every small sound feel louder than it should. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, rustling the leaves in a soft, eerie melody. James focused on the cloth, on the shape beneath it, trying to prepare himself for whatever lay ahead. Finally, he was ready to lift the last layer. The anticipation was almost unbearable. Both he and the woman held their breath, suspended in a moment that seemed to stretch forever. Whatever was under that cloth was about to be revealed, and James knew that nothing would be the same afterward. In that quiet cabin, with the sun now fully dipping below the horizon, James took a deep breath and prepared for the unknown. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, but so did a sense of duty, a promise, unspoken, that he would face whatever came next with courage and integrity. And then, with slow, deliberate movements, he began to uncover the mystery the woman had brought to him, unaware that the moment of revelation would change everything he thought he knew about the evening, the forest, and the life he led on his quiet ranch. James's hands hovered over the bundle, the cloth still partly covering it. The cabin was quiet, but the air felt heavy, as if it were holding its breath along with them. He could see the young woman watching him intently, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. There was a tension between them, unspoken but undeniable, a connection formed by the shared responsibility of this moment. Whatever lay beneath that cloth was clearly important to her, and that made James cautious. He took a slow, deep breath, trying to steady the rapid beating of his heart. In his years on the ranch, he had faced many challenges, cattle gone missing, sudden storms, accidents, but this was different. This was unknown. It required more than strength or skill. It demanded careful thought, patience, and courage. He had to do the right thing. "Are you sure you want me to do this?" he asked quietly, looking at the woman. She nodded, though her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the table. "Please, I need to know what it is. I can't leave it like this any longer." Her voice was almost a whisper, yet it carried a weight of urgency. James felt a chill run down his spine, but he reminded himself that fear could not dictate his actions. He nodded and began to lift the cloth slowly. With each inch he revealed, the bundle's shape became clearer, though it remained mysterious. It was compact, but there was something about it that seemed almost delicate. As the cloth peeled back further, James could see the top layer was wrapped carefully, almost as if someone had taken great care to protect whatever was inside. It wasn't just a random object, it had been intentionally preserved. That realization made his curiosity grow, but it also made him wary. Whoever had left this bundle had wanted it to be found by someone trustworthy. The woman leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the table. "Be careful," she said softly, almost pleading. It's fragile." James nodded again, carefully adjusting his grip. He had no idea what fragile meant in this context, but he respected her words. Slowly, he lifted the final fold of the cloth. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The cabin remained quiet, the fading sunlight casting long shadows across the wooden floor. He felt a surge of anticipation and braced himself for what would come next. And then he saw it. James froze, his hands shaking slightly as he realized that this was unlike anything he had expected. It was not a lost animal, not a bundle of clothes, not even something simple like food or tools. Whatever it was, it had been protected and hidden with great care, and there was a sense of importance about it that James couldn't ignore. The woman watched him closely, her face pale, but her eyes reflected relief that he had uncovered it. She didn't speak, but her gaze urged him to keep looking to see it fully. James could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, like a quiet warning that this discovery carried consequences. He took a step back, trying to process what he was seeing. There was something about it that seemed out of place, something that made his stomach tighten. He realized that this was not just a random find. It was something that had a story behind it, a story that someone had left for him to uncover. Where did you find this?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly despite his attempt to stay calm. "By the creek," she said softly, "near the old willow tree. It was abandoned. I didn't know what to do, and I thought maybe you could help." Her hands trembled as she gestured toward the bundle, but she remained composed enough to show that she trusted him completely. James nodded slowly, absorbing her words. The creek near the willow tree was a quiet, almost forgotten part of his property, a place where he occasionally wandered but seldom stayed. He had seen many things come and go in that area, fallen branches, lost items, even small animals, but nothing like this. Whoever had left it here must have been in a hurry or perhaps afraid. "All right," James said finally, his voice steadying. "We'll figure this out, but I need to know, what exactly are we dealing with here?" The woman shook her head slightly. "I don't know." "That's why I brought it to you. I hoped you would know what to do." Her eyes reflected a mixture of trust and worry, and James felt a surge of responsibility. This wasn't just about uncovering the bundle. It was about helping someone in need, someone who had trusted him with something important. He studied it carefully, noting the way it was wrapped, the weight, the subtle movements if he shifted it slightly. It felt almost alive in its stillness, not in a literal sense, but in the way it seemed to carry a story, a presence that demanded attention. James knew that whatever it was, he had to be thoughtful, gentle, and deliberate. One wrong move could ruin everything. The young woman watched him closely, her breathing shallow, waiting for his reaction. James could feel the tension building in the room, the kind of tension that comes from standing on the edge of the unknown. He realized that this was more than just a bundle. It was a puzzle, a test of patience, judgment, and courage. He decided to examine it slowly, piece by piece. He adjusted the cloth carefully, revealing just enough to see the shape without disturbing it too quickly. Every detail mattered, the weight, the texture, the way it responded to the light. James realized that he needed to understand it fully before making any decisions. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The sun had almost disappeared completely, and the cabin was now bathed in the dim glow of the last light. Shadows danced on the walls, adding to the eerie, suspenseful feeling in the room. The young woman remained silent, trusting him to take the lead, while James focused on the bundle with unwavering attention. Finally, he felt ready. He could see more clearly now, and the outline of the object beneath the cloth became unmistakable. His curiosity mixed with a growing sense of caution. This was important. This was serious. and he realized that he needed to think carefully about his next steps. "Whatever this is," James said quietly, "we need to handle it carefully. I don't know what it is yet, but I can see it's fragile and it might be delicate in more ways than one." The woman nodded, her hand still hovering near the bundle. "Yes, that's why I didn't want to just leave it there. Please be careful." James took another deep breath and steadied his hands. He knew that this moment would define what came next. Whatever was in that bundle, it was now in his care, and he could not take that responsibility lightly. He felt the weight of the evening pressing down on him, the quiet cabin, the fading light, the anxious young woman, and understood that this was a moment of truth. Slowly, deliberately, he began to lift the cloth completely, making sure not to rush. He wanted to see it clearly, to understand it fully, without causing any harm. The tension in the cabin was palpable. The air seemed thick, almost vibrating with the anticipation of the unknown. As the last fold of the cloth fell away, James finally saw the bundle in its entirety. And for a brief moment he simply stared, unable to move, unable to speak. It was unlike anything he had expected, something so unexpected and precise that it made his heart pound in a way he had never felt before. The young woman watched him carefully, her face pale, waiting for his reaction. She didn't need to speak. The look in her eyes said everything. Whatever was under that cloth was more than just an object. It was a story, a mystery, a challenge, and a responsibility. And now it was in James's hands. James swallowed hard and nodded slowly. "All right," he said finally. "I see it. I think I understand, but we need to be very careful. This is important." The young woman exhaled, a small sign of relief escaping her lips. She knew that James had the experience, the patience, and the integrity to handle whatever came next. Together, they were about to face a situation that would test both their courage and their judgment. And in that quiet cabin, as the last light of the sun disappeared behind the hills, James and the young woman prepared themselves for the next steps, unaware that what had just been revealed would change the course of their evening, and perhaps their lives, forever. James's hands trembled slightly as the last fold of the cloth fell away. The bundle now lay fully revealed on the old wooden table, and the dim light from the cabin windows fell across it. For a moment, James could not move. He stared, his mind racing to process what he was seeing. It was unlike anything he had imagined, far beyond a lost item or simple object. There was a weight to it, not just physical but emotional, as if it carried a story that demanded to be understood. The young woman watched him closely, her eyes wide and fixed on his reaction. She remained silent, but James could feel her heartbeat through the air between them. She had trusted him, had brought this mysterious bundle to him because she believed he could handle it, and now the responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. He took a cautious step closer and studied it carefully. The object was small enough to be carried, but the care with which it had been wrapped indicated that it was precious, delicate, and important. James could see that it had been protected from the elements, shielded from damage, and perhaps even hidden deliberately. Whoever had left it in the forest had meant for someone trustworthy to find it, and now he was that person. "Where did you say you found it?" James asked again, his voice calm but low. "By the creek near the old willow tree," the woman replied. Her voice was steady now, though a trace of worry lingered. "It was abandoned. I didn't want to just leave it there, not knowing what it could be. I thought maybe you would know what to do." James nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the object. "I see, and you're sure no one else is looking for it?" She shook her head. "I don't think so. At least I hope not. I was the only one there when I found it." James exhaled quietly. The forest near the willow tree was quiet and secluded, but that didn't mean there wasn't a chance someone had hidden the bundle there intentionally. Whoever it was had trusted that the right person would find it. That realization made James more careful. He knew this moment required patience, understanding, and thought. He reached out slowly, feeling the weight of the bundle in his hands. It was surprisingly heavy, though fragile in its own way. He could tell that if he moved too quickly or carelessly, he might damage it. James realized that whatever this was, it was more than just an object. It was a piece of someone else's story, someone else's life. The woman leaned forward slightly, her hands hovering near the table. "Please be careful," she said softly. "I don't know what it is, but it matters." James nodded. He understood that words weren't necessary. The bundle's presence demanded respect and caution. Every careful movement, every decision he made could change the outcome. He took a moment to observe the details. The top layer of the bundle was wrapped neatly, almost meticulously, and underneath, he could see that it was not just one simple item. There were layers, hints of something more complex inside. He felt his curiosity grow, mixed with a sense of foreboding. He didn't yet know what awaited him, but he knew it would have an impact on the woman, on him, and perhaps even on the quiet ranch that had been his sanctuary for so many years. Slowly, he began to explore the layers beneath the wrapping. With each careful fold he lifted, a part of the bundle revealed itself. James noticed subtle signs that it had been preserved carefully. Small folds, soft padding, and protective coverings that showed someone had taken time to make sure it remained intact. The woman's eyes followed his every movement. She had come here hoping for help, and now she was seeing that James approached it with the respect and care it deserved. She had chosen wisely. James took another deep breath, steadying himself. This was no ordinary discovery. He had a sinking feeling that what he was about to uncover might be shocking, even disturbing. Yet, he reminded himself that fear was not a reason to stop. He had a responsibility to face this carefully, with thought and courage. As he lifted the final protective layer, the truth of the bundle revealed itself. James felt his stomach tighten, and for a moment he could not speak. The object, or rather the contents of the bundle, were real, tangible, and yet so unexpected that it made him pause. It was something he had never encountered before in his quiet life on the ranch. The woman watched, holding her breath. She had seen it before, of course, but James' reaction told her that this was more serious than she had anticipated. She had trusted him, and now she prayed silently that he could handle what lay before him. James finally found his voice, though it was low and measured. I see it now," he said carefully. It's more delicate than I expected. We need to handle this slowly, carefully, and make sure nothing is damaged." The woman nodded. Relief and trust shone in her eyes. "Yes," she said softly, "please don't rush. It's important to me, and I think it might be important to someone else too." James understood immediately. Whatever this was, it had a story, a life, and significance that went far beyond their quiet cabin. He felt a sense of duty, a need to do the right thing, not just for the woman but for the bundle itself, for whoever had left it, and for the quiet world that depended on care and respect. He took a closer look. It wasn't fragile in the way that something like glass or pottery might be, but it was fragile in meaning. The bundle carried a history, a presence, a significance that required attention, patience, and respect. Every layer he had unfolded had been intentional, deliberate, and James realized that he was now a part of that story. The woman leaned closer, whispering almost to herself. "I found it near the willow tree, abandoned. I didn't know what to do. I just hoped someone would know how to help." James nodded. He could feel the weight of responsibility settle on him even more heavily. He realized that this wasn't just about uncovering an object. It was about understanding it, respecting it, and preparing for whatever consequences might follow. He had no idea what those consequences would be, but he knew one thing: he could not ignore it. The cabin remained quiet. Outside, the forest whispered softly in the evening breeze, and the fading sunlight cast long shadows across the floor. James felt the tension tighten around him. He knew that the bundle carried more than he could see at first glance. It had a story, and that story was just beginning to reveal itself. He took another deep breath and looked at the woman. "We need to decide what to do next," he said quietly. This can't just stay here. It's important and it needs attention, but we also need to be careful. Rushing could make things worse." The woman nodded, her expression serious. "I know, I didn't know who else to trust. You're the only one who could help." James felt a mix of pride and caution. He knew that trust was not given lightly, and that he now carried that trust with responsibility. He realized that the quiet evening, the small cabin, and the simple ranch life were all about to be changed by what lay in front of them. He reached out, placing his hands gently on the bundle, feeling its weight and presence once more. The story inside it was delicate, complex, and perhaps even dangerous if mishandled. He could feel its importance, and he knew that the next steps would be crucial. Minutes passed as they both sat quietly, the bundle between them, the room filled with a heavy sense of anticipation. James could feel the history, the intent, and the care that had gone into leaving it here. He understood that this was more than a simple discovery. It was a test of patience, morality, and courage. Finally, James spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "We'll handle this together, slowly, carefully. We'll make sure it's safe and we'll figure out what to do next. But we must respect what this is and treat it with care." The woman exhaled quietly, a mixture of relief and hope on her face. She trusted him completely, and James felt the weight of that trust more heavily than ever. The bundle was now in their care, and they both understood that its story was far from over. As the sun disappeared behind the hills completely, leaving the cabin in soft twilight, James and the young woman prepared themselves for what lay ahead. They knew that the next steps would require courage, patience, and careful thought. The bundle had revealed itself, but its full meaning and importance were still to come. And for the first time that evening, James realized that life on the quiet ranch could hold mysteries far beyond the ordinary, mysteries that could test his resolve, his compassion, and his bravery in ways he had never imagined. James sat back in his chair, rubbing his tired hands over his face. The cabin was quiet, but the weight of the evening pressed heavily on him. The bundle on the table remained, delicate and mysterious, and he knew he couldn't ignore it. Whatever it wasn't just an object, it carried meaning, history, and responsibility. And now, it was his job to make the right decisions. The young woman watched him carefully, her eyes reflecting both trust and worry. She had come to him seeking help, and now she had to rely on him completely. James felt the gravity of that trust, and he realized that the next steps would require careful thought, patience, and courage. One wrong move could cause irreparable harm. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, and stared at the bundle. What should he do first? Should he try to investigate further now, or should he wait until he could be sure that he could handle it safely? His mind raced with possibilities. This wasn't just a simple decision. It was a moral one, a test of judgment and responsibility. The woman spoke softly, breaking the silence. Do you think we should call someone who can help?" James shook his head slowly. "I don't know if that's the best idea. This might be something that needs to be handled carefully. Not everyone would understand what it is or what to do. We could make things worse by bringing in someone unprepared." Her eyes widened slightly. "So, you want to deal with it ourselves?" James nodded. "I think we have to, at least for now. We need to make sure it's safe first, understand what we're dealing with, and then decide the best course of action." He took a deep breath and looked at her. "But we have to be careful. We cannot rush anything. One mistake could change everything." The woman nodded, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She trusted him, but she was also aware of the risk. Together, they would need to proceed slowly and deliberately. James leaned over the bundle again, examining it with careful eyes. He had to be methodical. Each detail mattered: the weight, the shape, the texture. He could feel that this was more than just a discovery. It was a situation that demanded thoughtfulness and precision. One wrong step could ruin what had been carefully preserved. As he continued to inspect it, James began to formulate a plan. First, they needed to assess its condition. Was it stable? Could it be moved safely? Could it survive handling, or did it require special care? Every question mattered, and he knew that a hasty decision could lead to irreversible consequences. The woman leaned forward slightly. It feels important," she whispered. "I don't know why, but I think it matters to someone, maybe even more than just me." James nodded slowly. He could feel the truth in her words. Whoever had left this bundle had intended for it to be found by someone capable of understanding its value, and now that someone was him, he could not take that responsibility lightly. He carefully lifted the bundle, testing its weight and balance. It shifted slightly in his hands, reminding him of its fragility. He placed it back on the table gently, making sure not to disturb its structure. "We need to find a safe place to examine this more closely," he said. "Somewhere stable with enough light and space, and we have to do it slowly, step by step." The woman nodded, understanding the seriousness of his words. "I trust you," she said softly. "I know you'll do the right thing." James felt a sense of resolve settle over him. He would do the right thing, no matter how difficult. He realized that courage wasn't about fearlessness. It was about acting responsibly despite fear. And he knew that this was a test of exactly that kind of courage. He began to clear a small space on the table, moving a few items aside to make room. He wanted to make sure there was no risk of accidental damage. Every detail mattered: the table's surface, the light from the window, even the quiet sound of the wind outside. Everything needed to be just right before they proceeded further. Once the space was prepared, James took another careful look at the bundle. It was compact, but there was something intricate about it. He could see signs that someone had taken time to preserve it carefully: folds, padding, and protective layers that spoke of thoughtfulness and care. Whoever had left it here wanted it to be found by someone who would understand and respect that care. The woman watched him, holding her breath. She had come here seeking help, and now she saw that James was handling the situation with the seriousness it deserved. She felt a sense of relief, knowing that her trust had not been misplaced. James reached out slowly, his hands steady but deliberate. He lifted the bundle slightly, examining its balance and structure. It was heavier than it looked, but stable. He placed it back down carefully, making sure to maintain its integrity. "We need to decide what comes next," he said quietly. "We can't rush. We need to think this through. Maybe we can examine it in stages, uncovering it slowly and carefully. That way we can understand it fully without risking damage." The woman nodded. "Yes, I think that's a good idea. Please take your time. We don't want to make a mistake." James felt a sense of responsibility wash over him. He realized that the next steps were critical. They couldn't simply act on impulse. They needed patience, careful observation, and thought. He knew that this bundle carried significance far beyond what they could see, and that understanding it fully was essential. He began to plan the examination step by step. First, they would check the outer layers for stability and signs of wear. Then, they would assess the contents without disturbing the delicate structure. Finally, they would decide what to do next, whether to move it, preserve it, or seek guidance from someone qualified. Each step needed to be executed with precision and care. The woman watched him, her eyes reflecting trust and hope. She had come here with fear and uncertainty, and now she felt a sense of cautious relief. James was methodical, thoughtful, and careful. He understood the weight of responsibility and was approaching it with seriousness and respect. James took a deep breath and began the first step, examining the outer layers. He traced the folds and protective coverings, noting how they were designed to shield the contents. It was clear that someone had taken great care, and that care needed to be honored. He worked slowly, deliberately making sure not to rush or disturb anything unnecessarily. The woman leaned closer, whispering occasionally. It feels like someone wanted this to survive no matter what. James nodded. Yes, and now it's our responsibility to make sure it does. He continued his careful examination, moving slowly and deliberately. Every fold, every layer, every detail mattered. He realized that patience and precision were more important than speed. As he worked, James could feel the tension in the cabin. The evening had grown darker, and the soft glow of the setting sun through the windows added a quiet, almost eerie atmosphere. But he focused on the task, knowing that careful attention was more important than distractions. Finally, he completed the first stage of the examination. The outer layers were stable, and the bundle remained intact. He placed it gently back on the table, feeling a sense of accomplishment. They had successfully handled the first step without causing any damage. The woman exhaled quietly, relief washing over her. "Thank you," she whispered. "I knew you would handle it carefully." James nodded. "We've done well so far, but the next steps are just as important. We need to decide how to proceed, whether to uncover more or to wait and think carefully about what to do next." They both sat quietly, the bundle between them, considering their options. James felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, but he also felt a sense of purpose. He knew that careful, thoughtful action would ensure the bundle's safety and preserve the story it carried. After a long moment, James spoke again. "We need to trust our judgment, work together, and take this one step at a time. Whatever comes next, we must be deliberate and careful. The consequences of haste could be serious." The woman nodded, her eyes reflecting understanding and trust. She had come seeking help, and now she knew they could face this challenge together. James looked at the bundle one more time, feeling its weight and presence. It was no longer just a mysterious object. It was a responsibility, a story, and a challenge. And now they were ready to take the next steps, slowly and carefully, ensuring that whatever lay inside would be preserved, understood, and respected. As the cabin grew darker and the quiet night settled over the ranch, James and the woman prepared themselves for the critical decisions ahead. The bundle was safe for now, but the next steps would test their patience, judgment, and courage in ways neither of them could yet imagine. And for the first time that evening, James realized that life on his quiet ranch could hold mysteries far beyond the ordinary, mysteries that demanded careful thought, bravery, and a deep sense of responsibility. James sat silently for a moment, staring at the bundle. The cabin was quiet, except for the soft creak of the old wooden floorboards and the gentle rustle of the wind outside. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him like never before. Every decision he made in the next few minutes would matter. He could no longer simply examine or prepare. He had to act. The young woman watched him closely, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. She had trusted him to handle this delicate situation, and now the moment of truth had arrived. James took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He knew he had to stay calm, focused, and careful, but a flicker of dread ran through him. He had prepared as best he could, but nothing could have truly prepared him for what he was about to see. Slowly, deliberately, James began to uncover the final layer of the bundle. He lifted the cloth carefully, making sure not to disturb the contents too quickly. His hands were steady, but his heart raced. He had no idea what the final revelation would be, only that it was important and fragile. As the last layer fell away, James froze. He had expected something unusual, perhaps delicate, perhaps even confusing, but nothing had prepared him for what lay before him. The object, or rather the contents of the bundle, was something shocking, something so unexpected that it made his stomach tighten and his mind struggle to process it. The young woman gasped softly, covering her mouth with her hands. She had seen it before, but now, seeing James' reaction, she realized just how serious it was. It's exactly as I thought," she whispered. "I didn't want anyone else to see it, but now we have to do something." James nodded slowly, though his eyes remained fixed on the bundle. He felt a chill run through him, a combination of surprise, horror, and responsibility. This was no ordinary discovery. It carried a story, a history, and consequences that they could not ignore. He had to think carefully, plan carefully, and act carefully. This is serious," he said quietly. "We need to handle it with care. We cannot rush and we cannot make mistakes. If we do, it could be worse than we imagine." The woman nodded, though her hands were trembling slightly. "I know, that's why I brought it to you. I didn't know who else to trust. I thought you would understand." James took a deep breath. He could feel the gravity of the situation pressing down on him. Every instinct he had told him that they were now facing something rare, something that required wisdom and courage. He realized that this moment would define the evening, perhaps even his life, in ways he had never expected. Carefully, he adjusted the bundle, examining it from every angle. It was fragile, yes, but it also held a clear structure. He could see that someone had taken great care to preserve it, and now it was their responsibility to ensure it remained intact. He had to respect the care that had gone into it, even as he prepared to face the reality of what it was. "We need to decide what to do next," James said quietly. "We can't just leave it here, but we also can't act recklessly. We have to make sure it's handled properly, safely, and respectfully." The young woman nodded. "Yes, I know, I trust you. Please help me make the right choice." James felt a surge of determination. This was no longer just about curiosity or caution. It was about responsibility, morality, and courage. They had uncovered something significant, and now they had to ensure it was treated with the respect it deserved. He began to carefully move the bundle to a more secure spot on the table, making sure it would not fall or be disturbed. Every small adjustment required precision and patience. The woman watched him, silently supporting him, her trust evident in every glance. Once the bundle was secure, James stepped back and looked at it again. The full reality of the situation sank in. This was not a simple object. It carried meaning, perhaps for someone far beyond their quiet cabin. He realized that their actions in the next few moments could have consequences far beyond what they could see. "We have to keep it safe," he said, "and we need to think carefully about what comes next. Do we contact someone else? Do we preserve it here? We have to choose wisely." The young woman nodded slowly. I think it's best if we handle it ourselves, at least for now. We know it's important, and I believe we can protect it." James considered her words. She was right. They were in the best position to ensure nothing went wrong. But the risk was real. One careless action could ruin everything. He reminded himself to stay calm, deliberate, and patient. Every movement mattered. He took a slow, deep breath and began to examine the bundle more closely, checking every fold, every layer, and every corner. It was clear that whoever had prepared it had intended for it to be found by someone careful, someone thoughtful. That someone was now him. As he worked, the young woman leaned closer, offering quiet support. It feels like it's alive," she said softly. "Not in the usual sense, but in the way it carries meaning. It's almost like it's asking for care." James nodded. "Yes, I feel that too, and we have to respect that. We have to honor what's been entrusted to us." The minutes passed slowly, each one filled with careful observation and deliberate action. James could feel the tension in the cabin, the quiet suspense that comes from knowing that a single misstep could change everything. And yet, despite the fear, he felt a sense of purpose. He was doing the right thing, step by step, with patience and care. Finally, after what felt like hours, James carefully lifted the bundle one last time, adjusting it so he could see every part. The full reality of what they were holding became clear. The object was fragile, delicate, and important, more than either of them had fully realized. and now it was their responsibility to ensure it remained safe. "We have it under control," James said quietly, though his voice carried a note of awe. "We need to keep it this way, safe and protected, until we decide what to do next." The woman exhaled, relief washing over her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "I knew you would handle it carefully. I knew I could trust you." James nodded, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. They had managed the moment successfully, without panic or haste. They had faced the unknown and acted responsibly, and now the bundle was safe. He looked around the cabin, at the fading light and the shadows that stretched across the walls. The quiet evening had been transformed by what they had discovered, but they had met the challenge with courage and care. He realized that life on the ranch, while often ordinary and predictable, could hold moments of profound significance, moments that demanded patience, bravery, and careful thought. "We'll figure out what to do next," James said. "But for now, we've done everything we can." "It's safe, intact, and respected. That's what matters." The woman nodded. "Yes, that's all I wanted, to know it's safe. Thank you." James smiled faintly, a mix of relief and exhaustion washing over him. The night outside grew darker, the forest quiet and still. But inside the cabin, a sense of calm settled over them. They had faced the unknown together, and they had done so with thoughtfulness, courage, and integrity. As the evening drew to a close, James reflected on the events of the night. He had encountered fear, uncertainty, and surprise, but he had also discovered something profound about responsibility, trust, and courage. Life on the ranch would continue, as it always had, but the memory of this night would remain with him. It would remind him that ordinary people, even in quiet, simple lives, could face extraordinary moments and rise to meet them. The young woman prepared to leave, her bundle still carefully secured. She looked at James with gratitude and respect, knowing that he had honored the trust she had placed in him. "I don't know what would have happened without you," she said softly. "Thank you for helping me." James nodded. "It was the right thing to do. And you trusted me. Sometimes, that's all it takes to make a difference." She smiled faintly and stepped out into the night, leaving James alone in the cabin. He looked at the bundle once more, now quiet and still, and felt a sense of closure mixed with anticipation. The night had been long, full of uncertainty and tension, but they had emerged with courage and careful judgment. James finally sat back, letting out a long breath. He realized that life on the ranch was full of unexpected challenges, but he had faced this one with integrity and care. And for the first time in hours, he felt a quiet peace settle over him. The forest outside remained silent, the wind rustling softly through the trees. The bundle, now safe and respected, lay on the table, a reminder of the night's events. James knew that he and the young woman had navigated something extraordinary, something that would stay with them both for a long time. And as he finally allowed himself to relax, James understood a simple truth. Courage, patience, and careful judgment could guide even ordinary people through the most extraordinary situations. The night had tested them, but it had also revealed their strength, their care, and their humanity. And in the quiet cabin, with the stars beginning to shine outside, James felt a profound sense of accomplishment and calm.